The day my daughter finally came back home, I knew something inside her had changed. I saw it before she spoke a single word. She stood at the doorway, holding her bag like it was heavier than it looked, her eyes moving slowly around the house as if she was seeing it for the first time. I smiled, the same soft smile I had practiced for years, but my heart trembled quietly inside my chest. I did not ask her why she had come. I did not rush toward her or open my arms wide. I had learned, over time, that some moments need silence more than words. So I just stepped aside and said gently, "Come in, Betha. You must be tired." She nodded, but her eyes filled before she could stop them. That was the moment I knew. That was the moment I understood that the strong decision she once made had finally cracked. Leaving us had not freed her the way she thought it would. It had broken something she didn't know how to name. For many years, I imagined this moment in different ways. Sometimes I thought she would return angry, sometimes proud, sometimes not at all. But I never imagined she would come back this quiet, this small, like a child who had wandered too far and forgotten the way home. I remember the day she left us like it was pressed into my skin. Not because there was shouting or drama. There wasn't. It was the calm that hurt the most. The calm before a long silence. She stood in the same doorway back then, younger, straighter, her voice steady as she told us she needed to live her own life. She said she loved us, of course. She said she would visit. She said distance would not change anything. I smiled that day too. I always smiled. Mothers like me learn how to smile, even when something inside them collapses. My husband stood beside me, quiet as always, his hands folded behind his back. He nodded slowly, like a man accepting something he could not stop. After she left, he went into the bedroom and closed the door. He did not come out for hours. That night, I cooked dinner for two, even though my hands kept shaking. I placed her plate on the table without thinking. When I realized what I had done, I stood there for a long time, staring at an empty chair. People think regret comes quickly. They think it arrives like a storm. But real regret moves slowly. It grows in silence, in missed calls, in short messages, in birthdays celebrated without warmth. Years passed. Life moved on, or at least pretended to. The house stayed the same, but it felt larger and emptier at the same time. Some rooms stopped being used. Some lights stayed off longer than they should. We never spoke badly about her. Not once. When neighbors asked, we said she was busy, that she was doing well. When relatives whispered, we stayed quiet. At night, I would sit by the window and wonder if she ever thought of us the way we thought of her. I wondered if she missed the sound of her father coughing softly in the mornings, if she missed the smell of tea boiling before sunrise, if she missed the way I used to fix her hair without asking. I did not know then that she was also sitting alone in strange rooms, learning the hard shape of independence. I did not know that freedom can feel very lonely when no one is waiting for you at the end of the day. My daughter was never unkind. That is important to say. She was not cruel. She did not leave to hurt us. She left because the world told her she should. She left because she believed that staying meant losing herself. She left because she thought love would always be waiting, unchanged, untouched by time. I used to tell her stories when she was little, stories about patience, stories about roots. I don't know if she listened then. Children rarely do. But life has a way of teaching lessons when parents can't. When she moved away, the calls were regular at first, every week, sometimes twice. She told me about her new job, her new friends, her new routines. Her voice sounded excited, light, full of plans. I listened carefully, always asking questions, always encouraging her. I never said, "I miss you," too much. I didn't want to sound like a burden. Slowly, the calls became shorter, then less frequent.
Weeks passed, then months. When I called her, sometimes she didn't answer. Sometimes she called back days later, apologizing, saying she was busy. Busy. That word became a wall between us. Her father aged quietly during those years. He grew thinner. His hair turned white faster than I expected. He never complained. Sometimes he would say, "She will come when she understands." I would nod, though I wasn't sure if I believed it. On festivals, we kept her place empty. On birthdays, I still baked her favorite cake. I told myself it was habit, but deep down, it was hope. Hope is a strange thing. It keeps you standing when sitting would be easier. There were moments when I felt angry, I will not lie, but anger never stayed long. It always turned into worry. Was she eating properly? Was she safe? Was she happy? Truly happy? Or just telling herself she was? One winter, her father fell ill. Nothing serious at first, just weakness. I called her, my voice calm, careful, not to scare her. She said she would visit soon. Soon turned into later. Later turned into months. By the time she came, he was better, but something between them felt distant. They hugged politely, like people who love each other but don't know how to reach anymore. That visit was short. She looked around the house, smiled, and said everything looked the same. I wanted to tell her that nothing felt the same. When she left again, I watched her walk away without tears. I had cried enough by then. Some tears dry up and turn into quiet strength. As years passed, I learned how to live with absence. Not accept it, but carry it. There is a difference. I filled my days with small routines, morning prayers, cooking, cleaning, helping neighbors when I could. At night, the silence returned. Silence has a sound of its own. I sometimes imagined her sitting alone somewhere, staring at her phone, wondering if she should call. I hoped she would. I never pushed. Then came the phone call that changed everything. Her voice was different, not rushed, not cheerful, just tired. She asked how we were, really asked. She listened when I spoke. She didn't interrupt. After a pause, she said quietly, "Ummi, I think I made a mistake." I did not respond right away. I was afraid to breathe, afraid the moment would disappear. She continued, her voice shaking now. "I thought leaving would make me strong, but I feel so alone." That night, I did not sleep. I sat by the window again, but this time my heart was restless, not heavy. Days later, she came home. Now she was standing in the doorway again, years older, eyes softer, pride worn thin by life. I led her into the kitchen, the same kitchen where she had once laughed, complained, dreamed. She sat at the table and put her head in her hands. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she whispered, "I didn't know it would hurt like this." I reached across the table and placed my hand over hers. Her hand was cold. "Sit," I said gently. "Eat something." Because that is how mothers speak when words are not enough. That was the beginning of her realization. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet truth settling into her heart. And as I watched her that day, sitting in her childhood home, I knew this story was not about leaving. It was about understanding what was lost along the way. This was only the beginning.
When my daughter came back that day, she slept for hours. Not the kind of sleep that comes easily, but the deep, heavy sleep of someone who has been carrying too much for too long. I covered her with a blanket, the same one I used when she was young, and I sat beside her quietly, watching her breathe. In that moment, she was no longer a grown woman who had chosen her own path. She was my child again. As she slept, my mind drifted backward, slowly, gently, to the beginning of everything, to the days when our family was still whole in the way families are meant to be, not perfect, but together. My husband and I were never rich. We lived a simple life built on routine, respect, and quiet love. Our home was small, but it was warm. The walls had heard laughter, arguments, prayers, and forgiveness. Everything important happened inside those walls. Our daughter was our only child. From the moment she was born, the house felt fuller. Her cries filled the rooms, her footsteps followed us everywhere, and her questions never seemed to end. She was curious, stubborn, and kind, all at once. Her father loved her deeply, though he was not a man of many words. He showed love by fixing things, by walking her to school even when she was old enough to go alone, by sitting outside her room when she was sick. I showed love the way mothers do, through food, through worry, through endless reminders. We raised her with values we believed would protect her: respect for elders, kindness toward others, gratitude for what you have. We taught her that family was not a chain, but a shelter. As she grew older, the world began speaking to her louder than we did. She studied hard, dreamed big, and looked beyond our small home. I was proud of her ambition, I truly was. But pride often walks hand in hand with fear. When she spoke about leaving, it did not come suddenly. It came in pieces: small comments about independence, questions about living alone, stories of friends who had moved away and were doing so well. I listened. I nodded. I encouraged her education, her growth. But inside, something tightened. Her father noticed too. At night, after dinner, when the house grew quiet, he would say, "She is drifting." I would answer, "Children must drift before they understand where they belong." I believed that, or maybe I needed to believe it. The day she finally told us she was leaving, she spoke carefully. She chose her words like someone walking on thin ice. She said she loved us. She said she was grateful. She said she needed space to become herself. I remember her father clearing his throat. I remember my hands resting in my lap, folded tightly. I smiled. I told her she should follow her dreams. I told her we would always be here. What I did not say was how afraid I was of being left behind. After she moved away, the house changed its rhythm. Mornings became quieter, meals became simpler. Her room stayed untouched, as if she might walk in at any moment. At first, we tried to fill the emptiness with optimism. We spoke proudly about her achievements. We told each other this distance was temporary. But time has a way of stretching distance until it feels permanent. Her father aged faster than I expected. He missed her deeply, though he rarely said it out loud. Sometimes I would catch him standing outside her room, looking in, lost in thought. Our conversations changed. We spoke less about the future and more about the past. Then came the first time she canceled a visit. She sounded apologetic but distracted. We told her it was fine. The second time, it hurt more. By the third time, we stopped expecting anything. This is how disappointment teaches you to protect yourself, by lowering your hopes. Still, we never stopped loving her. Love does not disappear just because it is not returned in the way you hoped. As years passed, her life moved forward quickly. New jobs, new cities, new responsibilities. She learned how to survive on her own, but not how to feel at home. She visited occasionally, always brief, always polite. She brought gifts, smiled for photos, and spoke of being busy. I learned to read between her words. I sensed her tiredness even when she tried to hide it. One evening, after she left from a short visit, her father said something that stayed with me. "She does not belong there," he said quietly, "but she thinks she must." I did not argue. Sometimes truth needs time to become clear. Life continued, steady and slow. Our days were predictable. Our joys were small.
Then came the year everything began to feel heavier. Her father's health started failing more often. Nothing dramatic, just a gradual weakening. He grew quieter, more tired. I called her more during that time, not to complain, just to keep her close. She answered when she could. Sometimes she sounded far away even through the phone. One night, after a long silence, she admitted something she had never said before. "I feel lost," she whispered. I did not rush to respond. I let her speak. She told me about her loneliness, about the pressure, about how independence didn't feel the way she imagined. I listened, my heart breaking quietly. Still, she did not come home then. Understanding comes before action. Months later, the call came, the one filled with regret, the one that cracked her voice and opened her heart. When she finally returned, exhausted and uncertain, the house welcomed her without questions. That night, after she woke from her long sleep, she came into the living room. She sat beside me and leaned her head on my shoulder, the way she used to as a child. "I didn't know how much I needed this," she said. I did not answer. I only wrapped my arm around her. Because sometimes love speaks best without words. That night marked the true beginning of her realization, not just that she missed us, but that leaving taken something from her that success could not replace. And as I sat there, holding my daughter, I knew the journey ahead would not be easy. Understanding loss is painful. Facing it is even harder.
The days after my daughter returned were gentle but uneasy. Not because there was anger between us, but because there was too much unsaid. She moved through the house quietly, like someone afraid of disturbing the air. Every sound seemed to remind her of something she had forgotten and was now trying to remember. In the mornings, she woke early, even earlier than I did. I would find her sitting at the kitchen table, holding a cup of tea that had already gone cold. She stared out the window as if waiting for answers to arrive with the sunrise. I did not push her to talk. I had learned long ago that hearts open in their own time. Instead, I kept the house steady. Meals on time, soft music in the evenings, small routines that quietly say, "You are safe here." Her father watched her closely, though he pretended not to. He would ask simple questions. "Did you sleep well? Are you hungry?" He spoke gently, like a man afraid that one wrong word might send her away again. At first, she answered politely, short replies, careful smiles. But behind her eyes, I could see something shifting. One afternoon, while I was folding laundry, she stood in the doorway of her old room. She touched the doorframe slowly, tracing the marks where we had measured her height when she was young. "I used to want to be taller so badly," she said quietly. I smiled. "You always thought being taller meant being stronger." She nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "I thought leaving meant the same thing." That was the first crack. As the days passed, memories began to rise between us, uninvited. She would pick up an old photograph and ask questions she already knew the answers to. She would sit in the living room and suddenly laugh at something remembered, then fall silent just as quickly. At night, I sometimes heard her crying softly, not loudly, just enough to let the pain breathe. I did not go to her right away. I waited until morning, when the pain felt safer to touch. One morning, while we were preparing breakfast together, she dropped a spoon. The sound echoed loudly in the quiet kitchen. She froze. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, bending to pick it up. "For what?" I asked gently. She stood there for a moment, her hands shaking slightly. "For everything," she said. That was when the rising conflict truly began, not between us, but inside her. She started talking more after that, slowly, carefully. She told me about the years she spent trying to prove she had made the right choice,
about how she worked longer hours than necessary, afraid that slowing down would make the loneliness louder. I kept telling myself this is what I wanted, she said one evening, that freedom needs sacrifice. Her father listened quietly from his chair. When she finished, he said something simple. Freedom without peace is very heavy. She looked at him then, really looked at him, as if seeing his age for the first time. That night, she asked about his health, not casually, not politely, but with fear in her voice. He brushed it off, as fathers do. "I'm fine," he said, but she didn't look convinced. Over the next few days, she followed him around the house, offering to help, asking questions, watching his steps carefully. I could see the guilt forming inside her, thick and heavy. Not sharp guilt, but the kind that settles slowly and refuses to leave. One evening, she sat beside me while I prepared vegetables. "Ami," she said, "did you ever feel angry with me?" I paused, then answered honestly. "I felt hurt," I said, "but anger did not stay long." She swallowed hard. "I thought you would be stronger than this," she whispered. I looked at her. "We were strong," I said, "but strength doesn't mean not feeling pain." That night, she stayed awake long after we went to bed. I knew because I heard the light switch click off much later than usual. The next morning, she surprised us. She cooked breakfast. Not just tea and bread, but a full meal, like she used to on special days. Her father smiled softly. I watched her carefully. Acts of care are often apologies in disguise. As weeks passed, she began asking about things she had ignored before. Bills, appointments, small responsibilities that quietly hold a household together. "I didn't realize how much you handled alone," she said one afternoon. I shrugged lightly. "That is what parents do." She shook her head. "No," she said, "that is what I left behind." Her conflict deepened when she received an offer, a promotion, a chance to move even further away, something she once would have accepted without hesitation. She showed me the message, her hands shaking. "This was always my goal," she said, "and now it feels empty." Her father listened quietly. Then he said something that stayed with her. "Some doors open to teach us, others open to test what we've learned." She sat with that thought for days. I watched her struggle between the person she had become and the home she had returned to, between ambition and love. This was not a fight we could solve for her. This was her journey. One evening, as the sun set, she stood in the doorway again, the same place where so many decisions had been made. "I don't want to run anymore," she said quietly. I looked at her, my heart full but cautious. "Then don't," I replied. She took a deep breath, as if preparing herself for something much harder than leaving. The rising conflict was no longer about distance, it was about truth. And truth, once seen, does not let go easily. It began on an ordinary morning. I was in the kitchen preparing tea when I heard a sound from the bedroom. A dull thud. Then silence. The days after we returned from the hospital felt different. Not lighter, not easier, just more honest. My daughter moved through the house with purpose now, not hesitation. She woke early, helped her father with his medicines, and insisted on walking beside him whenever he stood. There was care in her movements, but also something else, a quiet urgency, as if she were trying to make up for lost time. Her father noticed it too. "You don't need to watch me every second," he told her gently one morning. "I know," she replied, "but I want to." That simple sentence held more apology than any long speech ever could. I watched them from the kitchen doorway, my hands resting on the counter. For the first time in years, I felt something settle inside me. Not relief, not victory, just peace.
Resolution does not come as happiness right away. It comes as acceptance, and acceptance is slow. My daughter began asking questions about the years she missed. Not the big events, she already knew those. She asked about small things. When did you start drinking your tea without sugar? When did Abu stop going to the market alone? When did the neighbor's children grow so tall? Each question carried a quiet ache. I answered honestly, never accusing, never blaming. I could see her collecting these details, placing them carefully in her heart. One afternoon, while folding clothes together, she paused suddenly. "I kept thinking you would always be the same," she said, "like time wouldn't touch you." I smiled softly. "Time touches everyone," I said. "The difference is who chooses to stay and feel it." She nodded, her eyes filling. Forgiveness is often misunderstood. People think it means forgetting. It doesn't. I had forgiven her long before she came back, not because she asked, but because carrying anger is heavier than carrying absence. What we were doing now was something else. We were rebuilding trust. That takes time. Some evenings, she would sit quietly by herself, staring at nothing. I knew those moments were filled with thoughts she didn't yet know how to say. One night, she finally spoke. "I kept thinking you'd just go away," she said. "Like distance meant growth." I waited. "Now I see," she continued, "that growth can also mean returning." Her father smiled faintly. "That is the kind of growth that lasts," he said. She leaned her head on his shoulder. He rested his head gently against hers. I turned away, not wanting to interrupt that moment. Over the following weeks, she began taking responsibility for things she once avoided: doctor visits, paperwork, house repairs. Not because we asked, because she wanted to belong again. One day, while organizing old cupboards, she found a stack of letters she had sent us years ago. Short notes, quick updates, promises to visit. She read them slowly, one by one. "I sounded so sure," she said. "I didn't know how unsure I really was." I placed a hand on her back. "We all sound sure when we are running," I said. She laughed softly through her tears. Resolution also brought difficult conversations, the ones that had waited too long. One evening, she sat with me after dinner, the dishes untouched. "Ami," she said, "did I hurt you?" I took a deep breath. "Yes," I answered, "but not because you left." She looked at me, confused. "You hurt me," I continued gently, "because you stopped letting us be part of your life." Tears slid down her cheeks. "I didn't know how," she whispered. "I know," I said. "That is why I waited." She reached for my hand and held it tightly. "I don't want to wait anymore," she said. From that day, she made a small promise to herself and to us. She would stay present. That did not mean she would never leave the house again. It meant she would never disappear from our lives. Her father's recovery was slow but steady. He regained strength little by little. Each improvement felt like a gift. One afternoon, while sitting in the garden, he spoke to her quietly. "I was never angry with you," he said. She looked down. "I was angry with myself," she replied. He nodded. "That is often the harder forgiveness." She learned then that healing is not just about being forgiven by others. It is about forgiving yourself. There were moments when the weight of her regret returned suddenly. A song, a memory, a missed milestone. When that happened, she would grow quiet, distant. I learned not to rush those moments away. Pain that is rushed does not heal. Instead, I would sit beside her and let the silence do its work. Slowly, the house began to feel alive again, not loud, just warm. Meals lasted longer, conversations wandered, laughter returned, careful at first, then easier. One evening, she cooked dinner and called us to the table with a smile. "For us," she said. That night, after her father went to bed, she sat with me in the living room.
I used to think success meant never looking back, she said. Now I think it means knowing where you come from. I nodded. Roots don't stop you from growing. They hold you when the wind is strong. She closed her eyes, absorbing the words. Weeks passed, then months. Her old life slowly loosened her hold on her. The calls from work became less frequent, the pressure faded. One day, she told me she had declined the promotion, not with regret, with clarity. I chose peace, she said. That sentence filled the room with something sacred. Resolution does not erase the past, it places it gently behind you. My daughter was no longer trying to prove anything, not to the world, not to herself. She had learned the cost of leaving without understanding, and the courage of returning with humility. One evening, she said something that stayed with me. I thought coming back meant I failed, she said, but now I know it means I listened. I nodded. Listening is the beginning of wisdom. As I watched her move confidently through the house, caring, present, grounded, I felt something close to gratitude, not because she returned, but because she returned changed. The pain had shaped her, the regret had softened her, the love had waited. Resolution had arrived quietly, and it was enough.
Time did not rush after that. It moved the way it should, slowly, gently, allowing wounds to close without being forced. Days turned into weeks, and weeks softened into months. Nothing dramatic happened, and that was the beauty of it. My daughter stayed. Not in the way people imagine staying, as a sudden promise or a loud decision. She stayed in the quiet ways that matter most. She stayed by waking up every morning and asking how her father slept. She stayed by knowing when my hands hurt and silently taking over the work. She stayed by listening. One morning, I watched her standing in the kitchen, sunlight touching her face. She was humming softly, stirring a pot on the stove. It was an ordinary moment, but it filled me with something close to tears, because ordinary moments are what we miss the most. My father's strength continued to return, slowly but surely. Some days were better than others, but hope no longer felt fragile. She walked with him every evening, holding his arm, matching his pace. "You don't have to slow down for me," he would say. "I know," she replied, "but I want to walk with you." Those words carried more love than any apology ever could. At night, after the house settled, she and I would often sit together. Sometimes we talked, sometimes we didn't. One night, she asked me a question I had waited years to hear. "Amy," she said softly, "were you lonely?" I took a moment before answering. "Yes," I said, "but not because you left." She looked at me, confused. "I was lonely," I continued, "because I didn't know if you remembered where you belonged." Tears filled her eyes.